A peaceful fishing trip turns into a nightmare as a massive great white shark relentlessly attacks a small boat, splintering its hull and leaving two survivors clinging to wreckage in open water. The predator circles, lunges, and tests their every move, pushing them to the brink. This is just one of 6 terrifying shark attack stories that reveal the raw power of these apex predators and the life-or-death battles that ensued. Stay tuned to witness the sheer intensity of these dangerous encounters. It was the early morning of August 15, 2020, when Jake Morgan and his 16-year-old son, Lucas, set out on what they thought would be a peaceful fishing trip off Monterey Bay, California. The sun was just rising as they launched their small wooden fishing boat, the Seafarer, from a quiet marina. Fishing was a tradition in the Morgan family, passed down through generations, and Jake wanted to share that bond with his son, who was finally old enough to help with the nets and lines. Monterey Bay is a famous spot for marine life. It's part of a large marine sanctuary that draws visitors for whale watching, fishing, and diving. The waters teem with life. Sea lions, dolphins, and schools of tuna are common sights. But beneath the surface lurks a predator that commands respect: the great white shark. These powerful creatures are known to frequent the bay, especially during the late summer months when seals, one of their favorite prey, are plentiful. Shark encounters here aren't unheard of, but few expect a close encounter, let alone an attack. Jake and Lucas loaded the boat with fishing gear, a cooler of snacks, and a radio for emergencies. By 7 a.m., they had motored out about 3 miles from the shore. The water was calm and the day felt promising. Jake took the helm, steering toward an area where tuna schools were reported the day before. Lucas prepared the fishing net, eager to prove he could handle it. Father and son worked together as the hours passed, enjoying the quiet rhythm of casting and pulling lines. By mid-morning, their hard work paid off. Lucas spotted a large school of tuna beneath the surface. Jake quickly positioned the boat and they dropped the net. It didn't take long before they felt the heavy weight of a full catch. Lucas grinned as he helped his dad haul the net back on board, their excitement building as they glimpsed the wriggling silver bodies of fish. The boat rocked gently with the motion of their efforts. Then the water changed. It happened subtly at first, a strange churning below the surface near the boat. Jake noticed it immediately. The calm waters rippled unnaturally as if something massive was moving below. He told Lucas to steady himself as the boat swayed more aggressively. The first sighting came moments later. A dorsal fin, large and unmistakable, broke the surface just 10 feet from the boat. It was a great white shark, at least 16 feet long. Jake froze, his mind racing. He knew sharks were common in these waters, but this one wasn't acting like the others he had seen from afar. The shark began circling the boat, its body slicing through the water with precision. Jake and Lucas watched, their excitement giving way to tension. The tuna they had just pulled on board flopped around in the net, and the smell of fish blood filled the air. Jake realized the catch had likely drawn the shark closer, triggering its hunting instincts. The predator's behavior grew more aggressive. It stopped circling and swam straight at the boat, ramming the hull with a force that shook the entire vessel. Jake and Lucas stumbled, grabbing onto the sides to steady themselves. Jake shouted for Lucas to hold on as he rushed to the motor, trying to start it. The engine sputtered but didn't catch. Jake's hands trembled as he tried again, but the shark hit the boat a second time, this time harder. The impact knocked several fish overboard, creating an even stronger scent trail in the water. The shark circled again, faster now, as if testing its prey. Jake grabbed an oar, his heart pounding. Lucas clutched another, his face pale but determined to follow his father's lead. The next hit came suddenly. The shark slammed its massive body against the side of the boat, splintering part of the wooden hull. Water began to seep in, and Jake knew they were in serious trouble. Despite their efforts to fend it off, the shark kept coming. Its attacks were calculated, each one weakening the boat further. Jake and Lucas swung their oars, trying to keep the predator at bay. The shark dodged their attempts, its powerful tail creating waves that rocked the sinking boat. The final blow came minutes later. The shark lunged at the boat with its full weight, striking the already damaged hull. The wood gave way with a loud crack and water poured in. Jake yelled for Lucas to grab onto anything that could float as the boat began to break apart. The two scrambled onto a piece of debris, the remains of the deck, just as the seafarer sank beneath them. Stranded in open water, Jake and Lucas clung to the wreckage. The shark didn't leave. It circled them, its dorsal fin cutting through the waves, its eyes fixed on the two figures. They used their oars to keep it at a distance, but the predator was relentless, nudging the debris and snapping at anything within reach. Minutes felt like hours as they fought to stay afloat. Jake's mind raced, wondering if anyone had noticed their absence or if help would arrive in time. He spotted a flare gun floating nearby, a miracle among the chaos. Reaching for it, he fired into the air, praying someone would see it. The Coast Guard received the distress signal just after noon. A helicopter was dispatched, and its crew spotted the flare within minutes. As the chopper approached, Jake and Lucas saw it and felt a surge of hope. The shark, however, remained close, circling like it was waiting for an opportunity. The rescue was harrowing. The Coast Guard crew dropped a rope ladder into the water, and Jake urged Lucas to climb first. The boy hesitated, but Jake insisted. As Lucas began climbing, the shark made one last move, lunging at the wreckage. Jake swung his oar with all his strength, striking the shark's nose. The predator recoiled, giving them just enough time to escape. Jake followed Lucas up the ladder, and both were pulled aboard the helicopter. The crew treated their minor injuries as the pilot flew them back to shore. Below, the remains of the seafarer drifted away, a stark reminder of the encounter they had barely survived. For Jake and Lucas, the experience changed everything. The sea, once a place of peace and connection, now held a deep, lasting fear. The great white shark had shown them its power, leaving them with a story they would never forget. It was May 3, 2018, a crisp autumn morning in New South Wales, Australia. Dylan Price, a 32-year-old lifelong surfer, arrived at the secluded Crescent Head beach before dawn. Known for its consistent waves and quiet surroundings, the beach was a haven for surfers who preferred the solitude of the early morning hours. Dylan, like many others, loved the thrill of catching the first waves of the day, a routine surfers call dawn patrol. Dylan grew up in nearby Kempsey, a small town inland from the coast. His parents often brought him to the beach when he was a child, and by the time he was 10, he was already surfing. Over the years, he developed a deep connection to the ocean, finding peace and clarity in its rhythm. Now a carpenter by trade, Dylan managed to balance his work life with his love for surfing, often waking before sunrise to spend an hour or two on the waves before heading to job sites. On this particular morning, Dylan parked his truck in the small lot near the dunes. He grabbed his board and a short wetsuit, feeling the cool breeze as he made his way toward the shoreline. The beach was nearly empty, with only one other car parked nearby. In the distance, he spotted another surfer paddling out, but the figure was too far to recognize. The horizon glowed faintly, signaling the sun's slow rise. Dylan stretched for a few minutes, placed his leash around his ankle, and waded into the water. The ocean was calm, with only the sound of small waves breaking against the sand. Crescent Head is known for its marine life, from dolphins to colorful schools of fish. But this stretch of water is also part of Australia's shark coast. Great white sharks are common here, drawn by the abundance of seals and baitfish. Surfers are well aware of their presence, but attacks are rare enough that most don't give it much thought. As Dylan paddled out, the cold water jolted him awake. His arms moved in a steady rhythm, the familiar motion calming his nerves. He reached the lineup where waves form and surfers wait to catch their rides. For a few minutes he floated, scanning the horizon for the perfect wave. The first few waves came and went. Dylan caught one, riding smoothly before kicking out and paddling back for another. Everything seemed perfect. A quiet beach, decent waves, and the freedom of the open water. But as Dylan turned to paddle for his next wave, something changed. The water beneath him shifted. It was subtle, but surfers learned to notice even the smallest differences. He felt the ocean grow strangely still for a moment, and then it happened. A crushing grip clamped onto his right leg, pulling him violently off his board. Dylan barely had time to process what was happening before the pain hit him. It was sharp and overwhelming, radiating from his thigh to his entire body. He kicked instinctively, trying to free himself, but the predator's jaws were locked tight. It was a great white shark, likely over 12 feet long. These apex predators are known for their raw power, capable of dragging seals and sometimes humans underwater with ease. The shark's bite was bone-crushing, its serrated teeth tearing through flesh and muscle. Dylan's survival instincts kicked in. Despite the pain, he reached down and punched the shark near its gills, one of the few vulnerable spots on its body. The shark shook its head, thrashing Dylan from side to side. His surfboard floated nearby, and in a desperate move, Dylan grabbed his leash and used it to wrap around the shark's snout. He pulled with all his strength, trying to loosen its grip. Miraculously, the shark released him. Blood clouded the water as Dylan floated, gasping for air. The shark circled once more, its black eyes fixed on him, but it didn't strike again. Instead, it swam away, disappearing into the deep. Dylan, his leg torn and bleeding heavily, clung to his surfboard, trying to stay conscious. The pain was unbearable, and Dylan's strength was fading fast. He began paddling toward shore, but his movements were slow and weak. Each stroke sent fresh waves of pain through his leg, but he knew he had to keep going. Then, in the distance, he saw the other surfer. It was a middle-aged man on a longboard who had noticed the commotion and paddled toward him. The man reached Dylan and immediately realized the severity of the situation. Without hesitation, he helped Dylan onto his longboard, carefully balancing him to avoid further injury. Together they paddled toward shore, but the tension wasn't over. The shark's dorsal fin reappeared, trailing them ominously. The predator wasn't done. Its instincts were triggered by the blood in the water. The surfers paddled harder, their eyes fixed on the shoreline, which still seemed agonizingly far away. The shark followed for what felt like an eternity. It swam close enough that they could see its shadow beneath the surface, but it didn't attack again. Dylan clung to the board, his breaths shallow and rapid. He focused on staying awake, knowing that losing consciousness could mean drowning. Finally, they reached the shallows. The other surfer jumped off his board and dragged Dylan onto the sand. By now, a small group of early risers had gathered, alerted by the commotion. Someone called emergency services, while others used towels and wetsuits to try to stop Dylan's bleeding. His leg was a mess, deep gashes exposed muscle and bone, and the blood loss was severe. An ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics stabilized Dylan and rushed him to the nearest hospital. He survived the attack, but his leg was severely damaged, requiring multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. The incident sent shockwaves through the Crescent Head community. Dylan's story became a hot topic, sparking debates about shark management and the risks surfers face. While some called for increased shark culling, others argued for greater respect for the ocean's natural inhabitants. For Dylan, the attack was life-changing. His love for surfing remained, but his relationship with the sea was forever altered. The memory of the shark's bite and the struggle to survive would stay with him, a stark reminder of the ocean's power and unpredictability. On June 12, 2015, a group of scuba divers gathered at a small marina in Gansbaai, South Africa. Known as the Great White Shark Capital of the World, this coastal town attracts thrill-seekers and marine enthusiasts eager to experience its rich underwater life. The waters off Gansbaai are home to dense populations of sharks, seals, and fish, thanks to the nutrient-rich Benguela Current. While great white sharks are the main attraction, the area teems with other species, including bronze whalers, blacktip sharks, and ragged-tooth sharks. Rachel Harris, a 34-year-old marine biology enthusiast from the United Kingdom, was among the group of divers that morning. She had always dreamed of visiting South Africa to witness the ocean's most fearsome predators up close. This was her third day of diving on the trip, and she was thrilled about the chance to see great whites in their natural habitat. The other divers included seasoned travelers, a few locals, and an experienced dive guide named Simon Grant, who had led shark dives for over a decade. By 7:30 a.m., the group was aboard the Ocean Spirit, a sturdy dive boat that regularly operated off Dyer Island. The crew briefed the divers about the day's plan, safety protocols, and the conditions. Rachel listened intently, her excitement mounting. The group was scheduled to dive near a reef where baitfish often gathered, creating bait balls, tight schools of fish that attract predators like sharks and dolphins. The boat reached the dive site at 9 a.m., and the crew dropped anchor. The divers suited up, checked their oxygen tanks, and entered the water in pairs. The ocean was clear, offering excellent visibility. Rachel felt a surge of adrenaline as she descended, following Simon's lead. The underwater world was alive with movement. Schools of fish darted around the reef, their silvery bodies flashing in the sunlight that filtered through the water. Smaller sharks, like blacktips, circled at a distance, curious but not aggressive. Rachel marveled at the sight, using her underwater camera to capture the scene. About 20 minutes into the dive, the first sign of trouble appeared. A school of baitfish rushed toward the reef, moving frantically as if fleeing something. The divers paused, watching as the water around them darkened with thousands of fish. Simon signaled for the group to stay close together. Then, the sharks arrived. It started with a few bronze whalers darting through the bait ball, snapping at the fish. Within seconds, the scene turned chaotic. More sharks appeared, drawn by the commotion and the scent of fish oil in the water. The predators moved with lightning speed, their sleek bodies cutting through the bait ball. Rachel was mesmerized. She had read about feeding frenzies but had never imagined witnessing one. She hovered near the edge of the group, captivated by the spectacle. But as the frenzy intensified, her awe turned to unease. A 15-foot great white shark emerged from the depths, its massive body moving with purpose. Unlike the smaller sharks, which darted through the bait ball in short bursts, the great white moved methodically, its eyes fixed on the activity near the reef. Rachel felt a jolt of fear as it swam past her, its size dwarfing everything around it. The shark began circling the group, its movements slow and deliberate. The smaller sharks gave way, sensing the dominance of the apex predator. Simon motioned for the divers to ascend slowly, signaling that it was time to end the dive. As the group began their ascent, Rachel lagged. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the great white, which now glided closer to the divers. She raised her camera for one last shot, her attention entirely focused on the shark. The great white made its move. It surged forward, snapping at Rachel's fins. The sudden attack sent her spinning, and she struggled to regain her balance. Her oxygen tank shifted, the straps loosening under the force of the shark's strike. Panic set in as she flailed, her movements attracting even more aggression. Simon acted quickly. He swam toward Rachel, holding a spear used for emergencies. He jabbed it at the shark, striking its side and forcing it to retreat momentarily. Rachel's breathing was erratic, her panic making it harder for her to stay buoyant. The great white circled again, undeterred by the spear. Simon signaled for the rest of the group to form a tight cluster. The divers huddled together, using their fins and equipment to appear larger and more threatening. Rachel clung to Simon, her oxygen tank slipping further. Another diver helped secure the tank, but Rachel was weak, her movements slowing as shock set in. The great white charged once more, this time aiming for the group. Simon struck it again with the spear, hitting its snout. The shark turned sharply, retreating a few meters before resuming its slow, menacing circle. Above, the crew on the dive boat realized something was wrong. They began pulling the group up using the safety lines attached to the divers' gear. One by one, the divers were hauled out of the water. Rachel was the last to ascend, her injuries making the process slower and more perilous. As she was lifted onto the boat, the great white made one final pass, its massive tail creating a powerful current that rocked the divers in the water. The crew pulled Simon and the remaining divers aboard just as the shark disappeared into the depths. Rachel lay on the deck, bleeding from deep gashes on her leg and foot. The crew applied pressure to the wounds while radioing for emergency assistance. The other divers sat in stunned silence, shaken by the encounter. The Ocean Spirit sped back to shore, where an ambulance waited. Rachel was rushed to the hospital, her injuries requiring surgery. She survived the ordeal, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would stay with her. The story of the attack quickly spread, capturing the attention of media outlets worldwide. Video footage taken by one of the divers went viral, showing the feeding frenzy and the great white's aggressive behavior. The incident reignited debates about the ethics of shark tourism, with critics arguing that activities like baiting disrupt the natural behavior of these animals. For Rachel, the dive that began as a dream turned into a nightmare she would never forget. The ocean, with all its beauty and danger, had shown her both sides of its nature in a single harrowing moment. It started like any other morning on the water. Claire Thompson, a 29-year-old marine biologist, steadied her kayak just off the coast of Kaikoura, New Zealand. She wasn't just there for fun. This was her fieldwork. Kaikoura is one of the best places in the world to study marine life. Its waters are packed with whales, seals, and dolphins, thanks to a deep underwater canyon that brings nutrients to the surface. Claire had spent months observing the dusky dolphins that played and hunted in the area, but February 18, 2013, was the day her quiet routine took a terrifying turn. Claire had woken early that morning, packed her gear, and headed to the shoreline before sunrise. The air was crisp and the water looked calm. She wore a wetsuit and packed a dry bag with a waterproof notebook, a small camera, and a handheld radio. Her kayak was fitted with an emergency buoy, a precaution she'd never had to use. She paddled out as the first light hit the horizon, aiming for a spot about a mile offshore where she had often seen dolphins. For the first hour, everything was peaceful. Claire spotted a pod of dusky dolphins not far from her kayak and began documenting their behavior. They darted and leaped through the water, seemingly unbothered by her presence. Claire took a few photos, her paddle resting across her lap. She loved this kind of work. The stillness, the focus, and the feeling of being part of the ocean's rhythm. But as she drifted, she noticed a change in the water around her. The dolphins she had been watching suddenly scattered, their sleek bodies vanishing into the depths. Claire frowned, her eyes scanning the surface. The calm was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. The attack came without warning. A massive force struck from below, sending the kayak flying. Claire barely had time to react before she was thrown into the water. The impact left her disoriented, the world around her spinning as she fought to resurface. When she broke through, gasping for air, she realized her kayak was upside down a few meters away. Then she felt it, a rough, sandpaper-like scrape against her leg. It was a great white shark, easily over 15 feet long. These apex predators are known to patrol Kaikoura's waters, drawn by the seals and other prey that thrive there. Claire had read about encounters like this, but never imagined being in one herself. She froze, her mind racing as she tried to remember every safety protocol she had ever learned. The shark circled her, its massive body moving with unsettling grace. Claire knew not to thrash or panic, but it was nearly impossible to stay calm. She reached for the emergency buoy attached to her kayak, managing to inflate it with trembling hands. The bright orange device bobbed to the surface, designed to act as a deterrent or marker in case of trouble. The shark turned its attention to the buoy for a moment, nudging it with its snout. Claire took the opportunity to grab her radio from the dry bag, which was still strapped to the kayak. Her voice shook as she called for help, giving her coordinates and describing the situation. While she waited for a response, the shark's behavior changed. It moved toward the kayak, biting into the hull with terrifying force. The sound of crunching plastic echoed in Claire's ears as the shark dragged the kayak underwater. Her only lifeline was disappearing before her eyes. Claire tried to remain as still as possible, floating near the buoy. The shark resurfaced, its dark eyes locking onto her. She held her breath, her mind screaming for a way out. Minutes felt like hours. Claire could hear the distant hum of an engine. A rescue boat was on its way. But the shark didn't leave. It continued to circle, occasionally bumping the buoy or diving beneath her. Claire clung to the buoy, trying to make herself as small and uninteresting as possible. When the rescue boat finally arrived, Claire's relief was overwhelming. The crew threw her a line, urging her to stay calm as they approached. The shark, perhaps startled by the boat's engine, moved away but didn't fully retreat. Claire grabbed the line, her arms shaking as the crew pulled her aboard. She collapsed onto the deck, her body trembling from the cold and adrenaline. The shark lingered near the surface for a few moments before disappearing into the depths. The ordeal lasted just over 30 minutes, but for Claire it felt like a lifetime. Her leg had a deep scrape from the shark's rough skin and her kayak was destroyed. Despite her injuries and the terror she felt, Claire's work with marine life didn't stop. If anything, the experience deepened her fascination with the ocean and its predators, leading her to focus on the role fear plays in how humans perceive sharks. That morning in Kaikoura changed Claire's life. The ocean, with all its beauty and danger, reminded her of its raw power in the most unforgettable way. It was July 14, 2010, and a group of tourists aboard the luxury yacht Ocean Star was enjoying a dream vacation in the turquoise waters of the Bahamas. The day had started with clear skies and calm seas, perfect conditions for exploring the shallow reefs near Andros Island. The yacht carried 8 passengers, including a couple on their honeymoon, a retired professor, and a young family. The crew of 4, led by Captain William Grant, had assured everyone of a safe and relaxing journey. Among the passengers was Elena Martinez, a 32-year-old graphic designer from Miami, who had saved for years to take this trip. She came with her fiancé, Rob Carter, a 35-year-old software engineer. The two planned to spend the day snorkeling and enjoying the pristine beauty of the area. The yacht cruised smoothly through the water, its powerful engines cutting a path toward the famous tongue of the ocean, a deep trench known for its marine life. By mid-morning, the yacht reached a shallow reef area where the group planned to snorkel. As the engine slowed, something unexpected happened. The yacht hit a hidden sandbar with a loud jolt, bringing it to an abrupt halt. The impact threw passengers off balance, and the crew scrambled to assess the situation. The sandbar had damaged the yacht's propellers, leaving it stuck and vulnerable. Worse, the collision had churned up sediment and injured several fish caught in the blades, releasing blood into the water. The crew tried to reverse the yacht off the sandbar, but the damage was too severe. The yacht began to tilt slightly, and Captain Grant announced they would need to deploy the inflatable rescue raft as a precaution. As the crew worked on the raft, the first sign of danger appeared. A large dorsal fin broke the surface near the yacht. It was a great white shark, estimated at over 16 feet long. Although great whites are rare in the Bahamas, they occasionally roam these waters, drawn by the abundance of marine life. The passengers watched nervously as the shark circled the yacht, its movements slow and deliberate. The shark's behavior quickly grew more aggressive. It approached the back of the yacht, bumping against the hull with enough force to make it shudder. The passengers and crew were startled, realizing the shark was testing its environment. The yacht, already taking on water, groaned under the strain. The crew inflated the rescue raft and helped the passengers climb aboard. The raft, designed for emergencies, could hold up to 12 people, but offered little protection against a predator of this size. Supplies were limited: bottled water, a first aid kit, a few flares, and 2 paddles. As the last person boarded the raft, the yacht began to sink slowly, leaving the group fully exposed. The shark seemed to sense the shift. It turned its attention to the raft, circling closer with each pass. The passengers sat huddled together, clutching the sides of the raft as the shark's fin cut through the water. Elena gripped Rob's hand tightly, her heart pounding as the predator's massive body brushed against the raft's edge. Minutes turned into an hour, and the shark's behavior became more erratic. It lunged at the raft several times, its powerful jaws snapping at the inflated sides. The group used the paddles to push it away, but the shark wasn't deterred. Each lunge left small tears on the raft's surface, causing air to slowly escape. The crew tried to signal for help using flares, but the yacht's distress beacon had been damaged in the collision. Their only hope was that another vessel in the area might see the flares or hear their calls over the radio. In the meantime, they worked to keep the shark at bay. As the sun climbed higher, the group's supplies began to dwindle. The tropical heat was relentless, and the passengers grew weaker from dehydration and fear. The shark showed no signs of leaving, its dark silhouette circling just beneath the surface. At one point, the shark launched a powerful attack, biting into the edge of the raft and pulling it partially underwater. Water flooded the bottom, soaking everyone inside. The passengers screamed and scrambled to keep their balance as the shark thrashed. Its jaws locked onto the raft's side. One of the crew members used a paddle to strike the shark's nose, forcing it to release its grip. For a brief moment, the shark disappeared. The group dared to hope it had finally given up, but the respite didn't last long. The fin reappeared closer than before, and the predator resumed its menacing circles. As the hours dragged on, the group's situation grew increasingly dire. The raft was leaking air, supplies were nearly gone, and the shark's persistence showed no signs of waning. The passengers sat in stunned silence, too exhausted and terrified to speak. Finally, just before sunset, a faint hum broke the silence. A rescue boat appeared on the horizon, its crew waving as it approached. Relief swept through the group as the boat drew closer. its engine loud enough to startle the shark. The predator hesitated, circling one last time before retreating into the deep. The rescue crew worked quickly to pull the passengers aboard, tending to their injuries and providing water. The shark remained out of sight, leaving behind only the shredded remains of the raft as evidence of its attack. For Elena, Rob, and the others, the ordeal was a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictable power. What began as a luxury adventure had turned into a fight for survival, one they would never forget. Clearwater Beach, Florida, was alive with activity on August 12, 2008. The sound of laughter mixed with the crash of waves as families built sandcastles, kids played in the shallows, and tourists lounged under colorful umbrellas. Clearwater isn't just a beach, it's a destination that feels like a slice of paradise. Known for its soft white sand and calm Gulf waters, it's one of the most popular spots for locals and visitors alike. Ethan Jacobs, a 26-year-old lifeguard, was on duty that day. He stood in the main lifeguard tower, scanning the shoreline with a steady gaze. Ethan wasn't just a lifeguard, he was someone who truly loved the ocean. Growing up in Tampa, just an hour away, he spent most of his childhood in the water, surfing, swimming, and fishing with his dad. His parents ran a small seafood restaurant, and while he helped out there as a teenager, he always knew his real passion was at the beach. Ethan had been a lifeguard for 3 years. At 6'2" and lean, he was built for the job. But it wasn't just his physique that made him good at it. Ethan had a calm, confident way of handling emergencies. Whether it was a child who got separated from their parents or a swimmer who underestimated the Gulf's currents, Ethan was always ready to help. The day started like any other. Ethan arrived early, meeting up with his fellow lifeguards to check the equipment and go over safety protocols. It was a warm, sunny day and the Gulf waters were inviting. By mid-morning, the beach was packed. Ethan worked with his team to keep swimmers inside the designated safe zones, marked by bright red flags. Florida's waters are home to a variety of marine life. You'll often see dolphins, stingrays, and schools of fish close to shore. Sharks, of course, are a natural part of this ecosystem. Bull sharks and blacktips are the most common species in the area. But great white sharks, though rare, sometimes pass through during their long migrations. These apex predators are powerful, reaching lengths of over 15 feet and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. Ethan knew the risks that came with the job. Every lifeguard did. But you wouldn't think about it too much when you're scanning a sea of people splashing around and having fun. By early afternoon, Ethan was in the lifeguard tower watching the water through his binoculars. Around 2:30 p.m., something caught his eye. Far beyond the safe zone, a lone swimmer was struggling. The man's arms flailed and his head bobbed in and out of the water. It was clear he wasn't just playing around. He was in serious trouble. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed his rescue buoy and sprinted toward the water. As he ran, he radioed his team to alert them. The other lifeguards cleared the area, blowing their whistles to get swimmers out of the water. Ethan dove into the Gulf, his strong strokes carrying him quickly toward the distressed swimmer. As Ethan got closer, he noticed something terrifying. A large dorsal fin sliced through the water near the man. It was unmistakable, a great white shark. The shark struck before Ethan could reach the swimmer. It lunged, grabbing the man's leg and pulling him under. Blood spread in the water and Ethan's heart raced. He swam harder, his focus locked on saving the man. When Ethan reached him, the man was in shock, his leg bleeding heavily. Ethan wrapped the buoy's strap around the man and began towing him toward shore. But the shark wasn't done. It circled them slowly, its movements calculated and deliberate. Then, without warning, the shark attacked again. The predator lunged at Ethan, clamping its powerful jaws around his left arm. The force was overwhelming, and the pain was instant and excruciating. Ethan screamed but didn't let go of the swimmer. Using his free hand, he grabbed the buoy and struck the shark's head, aiming for its sensitive snout. The shark thrashed, pulling Ethan and the swimmer underwater. Ethan fought with everything he had. He hit the shark again and again, refusing to give up. Finally, the shark released its grip, but Ethan's arm was mangled, bleeding heavily. He surfaced, gasping for air, and continued to drag the swimmer toward shore. By now, another lifeguard, Amanda Reese, had reached them on a paddleboard. Amanda, a 22-year-old with a fearless attitude, immediately assessed the situation. She helped lift the swimmer onto the board and signaled for Ethan to hold on. Too weak to climb aboard, Ethan clung to the side as Amanda paddled toward shore. The shark followed closely, its dorsal fin cutting through the water just behind them. At one point, it bumped the paddleboard, testing its strength. Amanda paddled harder, her focus entirely on getting everyone to safety. The shore felt impossibly far away. Ethan could see the crowd gathered at the water's edge, the other lifeguards waving for everyone to stay clear. His vision blurred as blood loss and exhaustion took their toll. When they finally reached the shallows, several beachgoers rushed in to help. They pulled Ethan and the swimmer onto the sand, where paramedics were already waiting. The swimmer, a tourist visiting from out of town, was taken to the hospital with severe but survivable injuries to his leg. Ethan, however, was in critical condition. The shark had crushed the bones in his arm, shredding muscle and tissue. Doctors worked tirelessly to save Ethan's arm, but the damage was too severe. They had no choice but to amputate just below the shoulder. The incident made headlines across the country. Ethan was hailed as a hero and praised for his bravery and selflessness. Despite the loss of his arm, he inspired a renewed focus on beach safety and shark education. The tourist, whose name was never publicly released, left town shortly after recovering. Ethan, meanwhile, faced months of rehabilitation and media attention. While the experience changed his life forever, his love for the ocean remained unshaken, a reminder of both its beauty and its unpredictability.